Baseball is back, baby, which means it's card collectors' time to shine. As spring rosters get set, it's never been easier to start selling cards on eBay, the largest global online marketplace for trading cards. Now through May 4th, you can get 50% off final value fees when you sell any card for $1,000 or more. That means more money in your pocket to put towards building the collection of your dreams. Opt in today at ebay.com/sell50. That's ebay.com/sell50. Terms and conditions apply. Apple Card is everything a credit card should be. It's easy to manage, built to be secure, and gives users up to 3% daily cash back on every purchase. The best part about Apple Card is applying is quick and easy. Apply in the Wallet app on iPhone and see your credit limit offer in minutes. Subject to credit approval, Apple Card by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, Salt Lake City branch, member FDIC, terms and more at applecard.com.
At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
The Athletic.
The 2025 MotoGP season has only just started, but seismic things are happening for the 2027 season. Michelin is out, Pirelli is in. The fact Pirelli is in, maybe not a surprise, given it's been sort of creeping up on MotoGP through Moto2 and Moto3 recently. This is the Race MotoGP podcast, and I promise me, Matt Beer, and Simon Patterson are going to make tyres interesting this morning, because they're not interesting. They're the least sexy bit of motorsport tech, really, aren't they, Simon? Visibly, there's not a lot.
They are, but they're also like a magnet for criticism and opinion, and I have lots of opinions. So I'm fairly confident that we're still going to make this work, because, like, let's be honest, this is going to be me ranting about tyres. It's also going to be me ranting about how wrong I think some fans are, which is probably going to alienate our audience, but I think we've got a fairly engaged audience that are going to know where I'm coming from. So it's all the people that don't listen to the podcast that I'm complaining about. Bear that in mind.
Yeah, our audience, if they're still here, they know you. They know what they're getting. It's just me and Simon today. We're giving Val a bit of a break, although you'll be able to see him elsewhere on the MotoGP output during the gap before Termas. So, Simon, this podcast is going out a couple of days after the news broke, but it's not news that's relevant to now, really. It's all about quite far ahead in the future. Two elements to it: Pirelli arriving and Michelin going. Do you want to quickly summarise what's happened, and particularly what Michelin thinks about it as well?
Yeah, so it's a new 5-year deal that'll kick off in 2027 to coincide with our new MotoGP rule book. It's not come as a massive surprise to hear that Michelin are heading out of the championship and that Pirelli are coming in, because, as you said in the intro, Matt, it's been kind of alluded to for a while, and Michelin have not exactly been kind of quiet recently on being rather unhappy with the massive amount of criticism that they draw. But I've got bad news for them. That is just a consequence of being a spec tyre.
Yes.
You will always be a magnet for criticism if that's the case. So, they're not going to find that any different in any other series that they head off to. But it actually turns out that the kind of their slight unhappiness with MotoGP, which really came to a head after Jorge Martin broke himself in multiple places in preseason testing, and Aprilia blamed it on Michelin. It turns out that that's not actually the reason why they're out, and it actually sounds like they were maybe outbid, because Pirelli have come in with a deal that covers all the championships, and Dorna want one tyre supplier to cover all bases in Grand Prix racing. So not only are Pirelli going to be covering MotoGP and Moto E, which they've taken over from Michelin, they're also going to be covering Moto2 and Moto3, which they've already taken over from Dunlop, and they're going to be gaining things like Asia Talent Cup, Red Bull Rookies. So we're going to have, for the first time ever, it will be the opportunity to start your Grand Prix racing career on a Pirelli tyre and finish on the same tyre. They're obviously not the same tires, but they have the same DNA. So it's going to hopefully make transition a little bit more straightforward. That's the official line from Michelin, who weren't interested in doing Moto2, Moto3, and everything else under small capacity. Although it also turns out that I've heard some rumors that part of the issue might also have been that Michelin weren't exactly delighted about being the massive headline sponsor every weekend, and then turning up to a paddock in a circuit that was also covered in Pirelli branding because of their Moto2, Moto3 association.
I could see that wouldn't go down well, yeah.
Yeah. So it's essentially, it's all about unifying the sport.
So a lot of our listeners will follow MotoGP and Formula One, I would say. I know some of you don't, and I apologise to those of you who... actually, David Martin from the Members Club had to, when he commented on the Pirelli news, he just added, I can't comment on F1 as it's 2 wheels too many and I have zero interest. David, we'll make it relevant, promise. So those of you who follow MotoGP and follow F1, but maybe haven't kept up on Moto2, Moto3, and where else Pirelli's active in motorbikes, you might be aware of Pirelli's F1 reputation, which isn't the greatest necessarily. But Simon, how is Pirelli seen elsewhere in the motorbike world? What has been the reception to how it's changed the racing in Moto2 and Moto3 so far?
I mean, they've made Moto2 and Moto3 better. But part of that, I don't think necessarily is because they're Pirellis. It's because they're new. And new always causes chaos whenever it's tires, because, we said at the start, they're not sexy and they're but they're massively important. When you consider the size of the contact patch on a motorcycle, they're a pretty big deal. They have kind of a reputation in motorbike racing as being a bit soft, a bit loose, but with that comes kind of fairly consistent tire wear, which means you kind of have to manage your tires from start to finish. There's none of this kind of holding it all back and then letting it go at the end, like Michelin have been quite good at. I mean, it's hard to argue that they've come into any series recently and made worse racing. And they're in a lot of series at the minute because they're already in British Superbikes, they're in World Superbikes, they're in World Supersport. They're not bad tires, they're different tires. But I don't think we're going to see the racing be a disaster because we're suddenly on Pirellis.
Yeah, this is a crucial difference to the Pirelli F1 story. So to fill in the 2 wheels only crowd, when Pirelli took over from Bridgestone in F1, it was given a very clear remit of you need to make this more interesting. And that was because there was one particular Grand Prix, I think the 2010 Canadian Grand Prix, where the Bridgestones, which were normally rock hard and very trustworthy, degraded quite a lot. And the race was great. And so the F1 powers that be were like, if we got more tyre degradation, our races would be great. Pirelli was instructed to make tyres that degrade, and we had some really good, if slightly contrived, racing in F1. The phrase, the tyres dropping off the cliff, became common because Pirelli would make tyres that went so far and then had an enormous descent in performance. The debate for probably about 10 years was how much of this is Pirelli not actually being good enough at making tyres that last and how much of it is doing what F1 has told it to. Pirelli would always maintain it was doing exactly what F1 had told it to. I think some F1 teams weren't so sure about that and wondered if they actually asked Pirelli to make a tyre that could last the whole race, whether it would manage to, but you can never prove that either way. But the other thing that was always crucial to the Pirelli F1 controversies was Pirelli was doing the job without really ever adequate testing. It had been a long battle to get the teams to let it run enough to get tyres that met their demands effectively, and that is a very familiar story in MotoGP. And this is where we're going to come into perceptions of how Michelin's doing and perceptions of what Pirelli will bring. Basically, Simon, there's no point in criticising a tyre manufacturer unless that tyre manufacturer has been given chance to make the product in the first place.
Well, yes, but also there's I have issues with one-make tyres and criticism being directed their way. Simply put, right, and I've been trying to explain this to people over the past 24 hours on social media, racers lie all the time, right? Everything they say is probably a lie.
Wow,
right?
Okay.
Because they've all got massive egos, right? I don't think there's any racer out there that's going to disagree with me. Racers have massive egos and they will always lie to the media to protect their ego and their situation, right? So tires, especially spec tires who are not paying your team sponsorship money, become the single easiest thing to blame for everything that goes wrong. Like, it's just, they become, like I said, they become the magnet for criticism because they're so easy to blame. Because you can be, and MotoGP riders have got very, very good at this. You make like a slightly, you can allude to what's happened with a bad tire and never get in trouble for actually saying what it is. But, you hear this language all the time in the paddock about, the one factor that's out of our control didn't work today. Oh, I wonder what that could be. So tires always get criticized. I am absolutely convinced, and I have been for a long time, I've made this case over and over again, that the whole Michelin bad tire thing is nonsense. It's generally riders doing things to tires that they shouldn't do. I mean, let's not, whenever Pecco Bagnaia blamed a bad Michelin tire on basically costing him the championship last year, and then you go back a season and Jorge Martin blamed a bad Michelin tire and exactly the same thing. And then you look at the two of them having massive slides off the line. And then suddenly 5 laps to do, their rear tire's not working. And you're like, wonder if that was Michelin's fault or the fault of the guy that really screwed up the start there.
Yeah, but shouldn't a good racing tyre be able to cope with...
But it can't do everything.
Okay.
Yeah, I think fundamentally it can't do everything. You can have, you can have a tire that would absolutely cope with that, but then it's going to be rock hard, and you're going to have riders complaining about no feedback from it because it's so hard, and it lasts the whole race distance without any degradation whatsoever. But again, there's no feeling from it. People are falling off all the time. Or you can have something that's softer and gives great feedback and great grip, but it's not going to last. And Michelin, I think, made a decision, maybe with Dorna's help, maybe not, fairly early on, that their tyre was going to be one that was softer and naturally degraded. And I think Pirelli are going to have a conversation, if they haven't already, about what style of tyre they're going to make, about what they're going to try and bring to the championship as a kind of an overall philosophy. But I don't think then you can kind of use that as a weapon against them to criticize them for bringing crap tyres for the rest of the contract.
I love how you started this podcast saying, I might upset some fans in this one because I've got some strong opinions. And then you call every motorcycle racer a liar to start off your point. So, it's not just the fans, is it?
What about racers don't listen to podcasts, do they?
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Uh-oh. The last cookie.
You can get a new box of cookies in as fast as an hour with Walmart Express Delivery.
Are you my guilty self-conscience?
No, I'm the voice offering you promo code EXPRESS for free delivery on your first order.
Hey, who ate my cookies?
You mean, these cookies?
Order now. Welcome to your Walmart. Promotion valid for first express delivery order. $50 minimum subject to availability. Restrictions apply.
Hey, it's Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast here to tell you about Michelob Ultra Courtside. It's getting fans closer to the NBA with a chance to win prizes like courtside seats, a trip to All-Star Weekend, and much more. Check it out at MichelobUltra.com/courtside. Michelob Ultra Superior Access, Courtside 24-25 sweepstakes, no purchase necessary. Open to U.S. residents 21 and up. Begins on October 1st, 2024, ends July 1st, 2025. Multiple entry periods. Visit MichelobUltra.com/courtside for free entry deadlines, and official rules. Message and data rates may apply. Void where prohibited.
When the Pirelli news broke, we asked the Race Members Club on Patreon just for views and questions. Just partly, I'm going to be totally honest, we were testing the water because, like we said at the outset, tyres aren't sexy. So I was like, are people going to be interested enough in a podcast on a change of tyre manufacturer? And we got so many questions and so many responses straight away that it made the case that we should definitely talk about this. So a little heads up for the members as well. You may have seen already, Jerez 2015 is out now. We're doing a 2015 revisited race every Friday that isn't a 2025 race weekend. And you'll be able to see our latest video in there as well, ad-free. That's all about Ayagura, including some exclusive insight from Davide Brivio. If you're not in the members club, there's 90% off your first month right now. If you are in the members club, hopefully this little heads up on what's coming out in there has been helpful. And thank you so much for all the questions on the Pirelli stuff, because we're going to devote the rest of this episode to just kind of knocking around your ideas and opinions on the Pirelli change and tyres in MotoGP. So Ranch Dingus is in the... I've put two headlines in the notes. One is meh Pirelli and one is yay Pirelli. Ranch Dingus said, I'm not a fan of Michelin and these tyre pressure rules. We'll come back to the tyre pressure rules in a second. But Pirelli haven't done great work in other bike series and their traits in tyres could lead to chaos. Simon's wobbling his head at that.
I mean, I think whenever people say things like Pirelli haven't done great in other bike racing series, they immediately kind of gravitate to recent history, like the opening round of World Superbikes at Phillip Island needing a mandatory pit stop because the tyres wouldn't do the full race distance. The Superbike tyres will not be used in MotoGP, right? That's like, let's say that straight here, because MotoGP bikes would last about 3 laps on what are essentially production tyres. So they're going to have to build a different, harder, racing-specific tyre, which hasn't traditionally been Pirelli's way of doing things. Even in Moto2 and Moto3, that's kind of a derived version of their street tyre, so it's not really the way that they've done it. But they're going to have to for MotoGP. Now, to use the example of Phillip Island this year and the fact that they couldn't do the full race distance, it's because Phillip Island is an incredibly abrasive circuit. It was really high temperatures at that time of the year, and it was just difficult circumstances, all those fast-flowing corners as well. It is worth remembering that MotoGP's previous tyre manufacturer, Bridgestone, who make very, very, very good tyres and made them specifically for MotoGP, also had to have a mandatory pit stop during a Grand Prix race in 2013 because their tyres couldn't last a full race distance at Phillip Island.
Yeah. Phillip Island and tyres, regardless of the manufacturer, it's a historic issue, isn't it?
Where Marc Marquez famously forgot how to count.
Yes. Yeah, we should revisit 2013 sometime.
Surely we have to do. What was the other one on our poll was 2006. So that's kind of has to be next, eh? But I mean, I don't think Pirelli make bad tires. I've not seen Pirelli making bad tires. They've made different tires, like we've said, different design philosophy, and a bit more street focused. That on some bikes has tended to mean that they don't last as long. But I mean, I don't want to be overly blunt about this, but like, who cares? Let's have tires that don't last as long. Let's have tires where riders have to work and manage. I want to see people have to think during races.
In the yay Pirelli camp, we've got Gordon, who says the character of the racing in Moto2 and Moto3 with Pirellis makes me optimistic. It seems like Pirellis make tyres which cause the best, most sensitive riders to excel. Now, we've talked already about liking the Moto2 and Moto3 tyres. Really interesting point from Gordon about which riders they're good for. Would you agree with that in the Pirelli year so far? I mean,
it has kind of been that case, hasn't it, with the guys that are a bit more sensitive, and I'm looking directly at Ayagura here.
Yeah.
Are the guys that have really shone. But I think that would probably have... I think that the cream always rises to the top. So there would have been an element of that anyway. But Moto2 in particular, Moto2 racing has been better under Pirelli. It's been more entertaining racing than it used to be. And part of that, yes, absolutely, was year one flux and all that. But it's starting to settle down now to look like, you know what, actually, yeah, they make better racing. So... that can only be a good sign, right?
Yeah, completely. Matthias Kainz is in the yay Pirelli camp as well. He even says their F1 tyres have evolved positively to the point where there's hardly ever any complaints anymore. I mean, on that, I'd say, give it a fortnight. There'll be some more complaints. But he makes the point as well that Michelin have so far failed to alleviate the concerns around their tyres in a meaningful way. He cites what happened at Buriram and how that race was kind of skewed by Marc Marquez having to manage tyre pressures. Was that directly Michelin's fault, says Matthias? No, it was a crew error, but the tyre pressure rules are only in effect because Michelin haven't been able to produce a front tyre that works safely with these bikes without requiring a frankly ridiculous safeguard in place. So there were quite a few comments about the tyre pressure rules, but there's also, alongside that, a lot of comments about the ride height devices, about the aero, and this kind of... then sets off a flurry of comments about the lack of testing. Like Ben Johnson says, perhaps a tyre supplier switch is the opportunity to renegotiate optional tyre testing. It's hampered Michelin's efforts to catch up with the aero developments. So this is the thing. Every time we go, people are having to manage their whole race around tyre pressures. There's a penalty that's changed the result around a PSI infringement. Okay, yes, that's to do with the tyres, but it's massively to do with aero development, ride height device development, and Michelin not getting the chance to catch up with that. And that's the team's fault, surely.
100%. I don't see any world in which you can blame Michelin for the fact that teams won't test things that they should be testing. The reason that we still have tyre pressure penalties this season is fundamentally because the teams wouldn't do enough testing over the past few years on Michelin's new front tyre that is already built, but just no one has enough experience with to use it in races this year. So the teams are complaining about something that is entirely their own fault. And they need to realise that. If Pirelli are smart and have been kind of watching and listening, they'll have mandated in that there will be some mandatory testing going forwards. Because, I mean, this is the other thing. Every team has a test rider now.
Yeah.
A full-time, very good test rider. There is absolutely no excuse why you can't be sending someone with a bike that basically you send them with a MotoGP bike and no spare parts.
Yeah.
To a circuit. You're not allowed to change anything on the bike all day. There's going to be someone there watching to make sure that the bike that you could do brake pads, but you're not going to be throwing swinging arms and fairings at it. So it's easy to do. The system is there to do it, and the teams have chosen not to. The manufacturers have chosen not to. The championship has not forced them to, and Michelin haven't had enough power to force it through. And as a result, we're stuck in the situation where they have a better front tyre that'll fix all this. We can't use it because no one's tested it. And again, it's all the team's fault.
Yeah, you say if Pirelli's been listening and watching, they can try to mandate something. A little warning from F1, and maybe this will help for MotoGP. But this conversation was equally prevalent in F1 about Pirelli wanting the chance to make a better product and not being given the testing. And now there are systems in place. There's blind testing. There's a use of mule cars ahead of the new rules in F1 in 2026. There's a lot going on. It's way better than it was, but it's taken 15 seasons to get to that point, and there will still be complaints that from both sides that the tyres are not what they should be.
Yeah, I mean, we know Michelin are trying to develop the new front tyre with a Fireblade, with a production bike. And it's got carbon brakes and MotoGP front suspension and Sylvain Gintoli on it, but it's still a production bike. You cannot tell me that it's impossible for Ducati with their 14,000 GP23s in storage somewhere to not loan Michelin a bike for an afternoon.
Yeah, and it's so much in the team's interest. We haven't even really touched on the safety aspect in this as well. The tyres are such a big performance factor and racing quality factor, but they have the potential to be lethal if they're not right.
Yeah. And I should say at this point, the tyre pressure rules, I think while everyone hates them, they're important because the fundamental reason why the tyre pressure rule is there is because Michelin are afraid that someone will start a race with tyre pressure that's so low that the front tyre will fall off the rim.
Yeah.
And that would be horrifically catastrophic.
Yeah, completely.
The first few laps of a race, someone at the front of a race and their tyre falls off the wheel. We're not going to talk about that because it's horrible.
Yeah, I'm just going to summarise a few of the things that the members have said that I think we're just going to nod along to and go, yeah, absolutely. Evil Chicken Zero says, don't like the tyre pressure rule, take the stupid ride height device away and limit aero so bikes don't overheat the tyre. None of this is difficult. Dorna seems scared of upsetting the manufacturers. Trouble is, those things are now out of the box and will not be forced back in the box to any properly meaningful extent, aren't they? Evil Chicken adds, the only good thing is the front tyre will become dominant over the rear again and we can see better racing, hopefully, with overtakes deciding the race outside of the first 3 laps. Yes, that would be great.
I mean, this is the thing, right? If it turns out that Pirelli did kind of outbid Michelin to come in and take over, I completely understand why. Because the ride height devices are going away for 2027. Changing rules always causes a bit of chaos. Changing tyres, as we saw in 2016 with 8 winners from 8 races in a row, causes chaos. So essentially, Pirelli are going to have a year 2 years where they look like they are the greatest tire on earth because the racing is going to be so good every weekend, and it's got absolutely nothing to do with the tires. It's just that everything has changed. So it makes sense to come in for a while and basically look like heroes.
Yeah, it's going to, as if we'll get onto this in a little minute as well, but unless we didn't need any more curveballs for 2027 with the scale of change, and now we've got what might end up being the biggest one of all.
Hey, Fidelity. What's it cost to invest with the Fidelity app?
Start with as little as $1 with no account fees or trade commissions on U.S. stocks and ETFs.
That's music to my ears.
I can only talk.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Zero account fees apply to retail brokerage accounts only. Sell order assessment fee not included. A limited number of ETFs are subject to a transaction-based service fee of $100. See full list at fidelity.com/commissions. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE SIPC.
This episode is brought to you by Coffee Mate. After watching this season of the HBO's original series, The White Lotus, this is the tropical getaway I needed. One more pina colada, please.
Hey, you're not on mute.
Oh, I thought I was in paradise. Turns out it was my Coffee Mate. Coffee Mate pina colada and Thai iced coffee flavored creamers. Inspired by the newest season of HBO's original series, The White Lotus. For the love of coffee. Try now.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
One of the other dominant themes in the questions and opinions from members was the fear of a monopoly, not just over motorbike racing as well. Pirelli leading the way in F1 and in MotoGP is, for motorsport in general, a few people thought, is that actually going to be ideal? Now, we understand Pirelli might be on its way out of F1 anyway, and although ultimately there'll be one big boss signing off what Pirelli's involved in, it's not a case of Pirelli's quitting F1 to go to MotoGP. There's been a lot of F1 paddock talk for a while that this would be Pirelli's last deal, and it's as close to coincidental as it can be that it may well exit F1 at the time it arrives in MotoGP. But from a pure motorbike point of view, Simon, are there downsides to Pirelli having a monopoly on all the major, well, not even all the major series, all the series pretty much with this deal? Pretty much.
I mean, yeah, it's going to be great news for the World Endurance Championship if you like Tyre Wars, because they still have a tire. They have no spec tire. But basically everything else is now under one brand. British Superbikes, World Superbikes, all of their support classes, MotoGP and all of their support classes, the most dominant brand at the Isle of Man TT at the minute.
Yeah.
They kind of, they lock it out. And I'm quite surprised that Dorna decided to announce this deal while they're already in the middle of a monopolies investigation.
Yeah, the optics of that are not great, are they?
Yeah. Even if it is separate, I still think it's unusual timing. But I mean, it is what it is. It is a monopoly and it isn't, because you have to think that it's probably going to start nudging other championships in a different direction.
True.
And you know, it won't remain this way forever. Plus, it's probably better for like national level championships. It's definitely better for endurance because they're going to get all the money. You know, Michelin, I now expect to come into motorbike racing endurance in a really big way, the way that Bridgestone did when they left MotoGP.
Yeah.
And essentially, you know, Bridgestone are probably a good case study because they've not been the tyre manufacturer in any world championship since they left MotoGP, but it's not really harmed their development.
No, good point.
They're still making the tyre for the Suzuki ATR, you know?
Yeah, it is interesting like how many very big tyre manufacturers with racing heritage, thanks to the kind of change towards Pirelli across so many series, don't actually have a major racing program at the moment, but it's not necessarily seeming to hurt them. You mentioned tyre wars there around endurance. Frank Quinn says, why not just do away with a single tyre producer? This isn't production racing where everything is the same. It's prototype racing. multiple tyre manufacturers on the grid, driving development and competition, trying to secure team deals, push the envelope. Some tyres may suit different strategies and race methods better. It would sure beat the hell out of this rider in second or third is trying hard to get past the rider in front. And they've had a moment because their tyre pressure's ballooned and they pull back and sit there. So, interesting. Tyre wars. You're shaking your head. I started following MotoGP at a time when we still had Dunlop around. I've still got really fond memories of Sylvain Guintoli on a Tech 3 Dunlop shod Yamaha doing amazing things in the wet. Michelin and Bridgestone were having the main tyre war up front. There's Valentino Rossi's desperation to switch tyre manufacturers causing the wall down the Yamaha garage. I like tyre wars. I loved them in F1 as well. I think they created some of F1's most interesting seasons, but they've become like a kind of unspoken thing. You cannot talk about a tyre war being part of mid 21st century motorsport. Where do you stand?
So I should say the old MotoGP tyre wars, the way that it was in the kind of the height of it, like early noughties, early mid noughties, I hate that.
Okay.
Because the whole building special tyres just for Valentino Rossi on a Friday night for Sunday thing is great if you're Valentino Rossi, but all it does is it drives the gap from back to front further, right? The guys at the front only get faster, whereas the guys at the back get slower because they're not getting any of the special treatment. And for that reason, I don't like full-on tyre wars. I like one make tires because it kind of neutralizes the one thing that's out of the team's control. It's like, I don't want to say it's like if the circuit had 3 different types of asphalt depending on what racing line you're on, but it's not that far off that. You know what I mean? It kind of neutralizes something that they can't do anything about. So I like it for that reason. And I'm also aware that if we did have tyre wars, we'd probably have weekends where there would be 5 Ducatis or 6 Ducatis in the top 6 because their Michelins worked really well that weekend. And then
as opposed to now where that never would happen.
Well, but then there'd be another weekend where there'd be 4 Yamahas at the front because their Dunlops are working really well, or 4 Hondas at the front because their Bridgestones work really well. And you did used to get an element of that back in the old days where a tyre would work at a circuit and that, whoever was on it would dominate by a big margin. I've always thought that maybe there's room for like a hybrid model where you maybe have to imagine a world where you could bid to be a tyre manufacturer. Say we had 4 tyre manufacturers in MotoGP, and every rider that they provide tyres to has to get exactly the same thing.
Yep.
So there's none of these specials. And then you also throw in a wildcard rule like no manufacturer can have more than X number of bikes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And maybe you even go as far as throwing it in to say every motorcycle manufacturer has to have at least 2 different tyre manufacturers.
Okay, yeah. So yeah,
I'd love to see some sort of a hybrid model like that where there's still, it's very tightly regulated, but there's more than one manufacturer involved, just to see if it would spice it up a bit.
This is my point about modern tyre wars and how they shouldn't be off the table, because I get all the reasons around like ferocious development, increasing speeds, increasing costs, and like you say, that the kind of special tyres for Rossi on a Friday night, that was crazy. It was kind of cool at the same time, but it was also unsustainably crazy.
Yeah.
But all of that was done away with in the world that is so different to how motorsport is run now. This is a time that the concession rules exist and teams go along with them. Standard ECUs exist. F1 has a cost cap and it works and it exists. Things that we used to think could never happen, teams would never agree, they'd never be possible, now happen, and teams do, sometimes grudgingly, but pretty much okay about them. They do agree. So let's have a somehow regulated, so it's not insane, tyre war again.
You know what the fundamental problem here is? It's the exact same reason why we, for example, don't have career Moto3 riders anymore. It's because motorsport was so heavily reliant on cigarette money. And it all went away, and we've still not financially recovered. And essentially, cigarette money let you fund endless development.
Yeah.
And create, that's why teams are now happy to have a price cap.
Of course, yeah. Yeah.
Because there's less money in the sport as a whole.
Yeah, I don't ever want to be back in a situation where motorsport heavily benefits from an advertising source that's been banned for good reasons everywhere else, and it jumps on.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it is striking that it was so lucrative that it has never really been replaced. Even motorsport's done its best, like dally with nicotine substitutes and crypto, but hasn't quite monopolised those.
And energy drinks,
betting company. Yeah. Let's avoid this journey. So a couple of people have agreed with us about how good it is. This is actually happening to coincide with the 2027 rule changes. A Wintham says, it feels sort of bittersweet to see Michelin go after everything that's happened with tyre pressures and the craziness. Is it the right move? Time will tell. The only thing that does make sense is the timing. If all the teams are basically having to start from scratch, why not have that literally be from the ground up? And perhaps Dorna is hoping a new tyre can cut the power and speed of the bikes as much as the new engine spec. It does kind of fit together quite well with the rule change. Does it also complicate it a bit more as well, maybe given that teams do already have those rules to work with? They'll have started work and now they've got to factor in a change of tyre supplier? I mean,
it sounds like the new rules are nowhere near as set in stone as we thought they were. I spoke to a few people in Bury Ram and there's an outline to the rules, but there's not much detail yet beyond the engine spec, which is obviously the longest lead time. So I think it's probably not going to affect teams that much. I think that most people who have started 2027 development right now will be working on engines and won't have thought about a frame to put them in or anything like that. And, at the end of the day, they have given them fairly good lead time in this. You would expect that we'll see the first 850s on track, maybe even as early as this time next year. And they'll be running Pirelli tyres from the start. It would be much more of a disaster if they announced this halfway through next year.
Yeah, that's very true. I love this one. Steve JJH says 2027 is going to be a proper curveball. Agreed. David Alonso for the championship.
Oh, no, not Toprak.
Well, this is my next curveball question. Graham Lee says it'd be good for new riders and Toprak and Nicolo coming in from World Superbikes.
I don't know how good it's going to be for people coming from Superbikes simply because I don't know how similar the tyres are going to be. They're not going to be Superbike tyres because, as we said, they'd last an outlap on a MotoGP bike if it was ridden the wrong way. I think that they're going to have to do something very different for here. So I don't know how easy the process is going to be for people who've rode them before. It will create weird outliers. But again, cream always rises to the top, and I think we will get an element of seeing, this. It'll still be the same faces at the sharp end of the championship. It's just that we're going to see, I think, more oddities appearing. And I'm very much looking at the 2016 season whenever we first went to Michelin, and it was still Marc Marquez that won the championship, but we had like 12 different race winners, something stupid like that. I think we're going to have another year like that. It's going to be highly entertaining. I love race weekends that start not knowing who's going to win the race.
Yes. And I'm a little bit anxious at the moment that we're not going to have too many of those for a little while in MotoGP, and especially not which team, even if there's uncertainty over riders. And with the engine freeze and everything, and all the focus on 2027, this might be the case for a little while. It's lucky that it's someone so iconic and attention-grabbing who is the predictable winner right now in Marc Marquez, but yeah. The rookie point about Alonso, I mean, you're going to write something for the site that by the time this podcast comes out might actually be up, I reckon, about David Alonso's start to his Moto2 season, which is kind of in line with what we predicted in our video, saying kind of, give him a break this year. It might not be smooth. But on the wider rookies point, 2027 could be a really good year to be a rookie who's used Pirellis in Moto2. That could really pay off.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll just be a good year to be a rookie anyway, because the bikes are changing, so knowledge will be less. Like riding, everyone's going to have to change their riding style. So if you're just one of 22 that has to change their riding style, or hopefully even 24 by then, that will be a good thing. But with this element in the mix as well, yeah, it's good. It's a leg up. It's something that just gets in the way a little bit. I like it.
So hopefully, listeners, we've managed to make tyres sound interesting. Hopefully Simon hasn't managed to insult all of you along the way. Thank you, members, for all the questions. Even if we didn't manage to get through them all or name check all of you, they were really helpful for steering the kind of things that we realised you wanted to talk about in this episode, and we'll do more shout outs like that. Val will be back in to join us for the post Termas de Rio Hondo episode. We may as well do a quick Larry prediction. Simon, who's your Termas winner going to be?
Marco Bezzecchi.
I'm going to say Pecco Bagnaia. I don't think the Bez thing, it makes so much sense. He needed to
I'm mainly floating in optimism.
Yeah, we're so excited about 2027 now. It's bled through, and we're convinced we're going to have a shock winner at Termas. Although it might not be a shock if you've listened to our podcast too much or watched our videos, because we bang on about Bezzecchi, Aprilia and Termas a lot. But he needs to do more at Bury-Ram for me to completely believe in that storyline. We'll be back in your ears Sunday night / Monday morning, end of this week, to see which of us was right or wrong.
The Athletic.